microphone hissed with static as Senator Mitt Romney leaned forward, his tailored suit rustling against the leather chair. A condescending smirk played on his lips, his eyes scanning the packed committee room before locking onto Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. "With all due respect to the gentlewoman from Texas," he began, his voice dripping with paternalistic warmth that somehow made the words cut deeper. "Perhaps we should leave complex fiscal matters to those with more traditional economic backgrounds." The air grew thick, every spectator holding their breath. He'd done it, dismissed her expertise, her lived experience, her very right to speak on behalf of her constituents with a single patronizing phrase. The camera zoomed in on Congresswoman Crockett, who didn't flinch, didn't interrupt, but simply met his gaze with an unsettling calm. He thought he could diminish her with a throwaway line. But in less than 60 seconds, she would redefine his entire career, and the world was watching. This wasn't just another partisan squabble over some forgettable amendment. The bill on the floor was the Economic Dignity Act, a monumental piece of legislation that held the power to reshape the financial landscape for millions. It tackled the two most critical pressure points for working families: accessible, affordable childcare, and equitable access to small business loans. For communities of color, for women, for immigrants striving to build something from nothing, this wasn't policy, it was a lifeline. And standing in the way was Mitt Romney, the very embodiment of an insulated political establishment, a man whose entire life had been curated by legacy and wealth, now questioning the lived experience of the one person in the room who actually understood the stakes. Congresswoman Crockett wasn't just a lawmaker. She was a vessel for every voice that had ever been locked out of these mahogany-paneled rooms, every dream deferred by a system designed to favor the already powerful. This was more than a debate over policy. It was a battle for the soul of American representation. And what happened next would rewrite the rules of power in a single breathtaking moment. To understand the smirk, you must understand the man. Mitt Romney wasn't born into politics. He was born into a dynasty. The son of a governor and auto executive, his was a world of boardrooms and country clubs where problems were solved with capital and connections, not compassion. His entire life has been a masterclass in navigating systems designed for people like him to succeed. He never lay awake wondering how to cover a medical bill or if a bank would deny a small business loan based on his zip code. This isn't to say he's evil, but that's almost worse. He represents something far more insidious. A system so insulated, so utterly divorced from the realities of everyday Americans, that it can no longer even recognize its own biases. This is the man who famously dismissed 47% of the country as dependent victims, who suggested asking parents for loans to start businesses instead of addressing systemic barriers, who built a car elevator in his California mansion while arguing against raising the minimum wage. His privilege isn't just financial, it's a fundamental failure of imagination, an inability to conceive of struggles he has never had to endure. His condescension toward Congresswoman Crockett wasn't calculated malice. It was the unthinking reflex of a man who has always been the smartest person in the room, according to a rubric he helped write. But every system eventually meets a force it can't ignore, and on this day, that force was a woman who didn't just learn about struggle from textbooks, she lived it. If Romney's story is one of inherited access, Jasmine Crockett's is one of seized opportunity. Her understanding of the Economic Dignity Act didn't come from white papers. It was etched into her life story long before she ever set foot in Congress. Before she was a representative, she was a civil rights attorney on the front lines in Texas, fighting voter suppression tactics aimed squarely at her community. She didn't just argue cases. She organized carpools to drive elderly voters to polling places miles away after local sites were shuttered. She knew the cost of a loan because she'd watched her parents navigate predatory lending practices, and she'd represented small business owners whose dreams were held hostage by banks that saw their zip codes as a greater risk than their creditworthiness. Her law practice wasn't a stepping stone, it was a battlefield where she fought for people who'd been promised a fair shot but were handed a stacked deck. She'd stood across from powerful corporations that polluted neighborhoods and then denied responsibility, looked into the eyes of parents working 3 jobs yet still unable to afford quality childcare. For her, economics wasn't an abstract theory of supply and demand. It was the reason a family had to choose between rent and insulin, the barrier between a brilliant idea and a business license, the quiet despair in a mother's eyes when she realizes her second job will still not cover a safe place for her child to learn and grow. This was the lived experience Romney so casually dismissed, the very expertise that made her not just qualified, but essential to the debate. She wasn't there to play political games. She was there to represent the raw, often ignored truth of millions. While Romney was debating economic theory in boardrooms, Crockett was seeing its human cost in courtrooms. And that difference was about to collide on national television. A smug satisfaction settled over Romney's features as he finished speaking, clearly believing he had delivered a masterstroke of political maneuvering. He adjusted his tie, leaning back slightly as if to admire his own handiwork. Perhaps the Congresswoman would be better served, he continued, his tone laced with faux concern, to stick to matters she might actually understand. The air in the room went from tense to electric. You could feel the collective intake of breath from staffers and spectators alike. A few committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, eyes darting between the 2 principals, unsure where to land. But Congresswoman Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't lean forward to rebut or sputter in outrage. Instead, she offered a silence more powerful than any interruption. She let his words hang in the thick, heavy air, allowing their sheer hollowness to resonate through the chamber until every ounce of their condescension was laid bare for all to witness. Her calm was unnerving, a placid lake reflecting back the sheer absurdity of his assumption. The room held its breath, waiting for her to explode. But her power wasn't in her volume. It was in her precision. And what she said next would require a surgical strike, dismantling his argument word by word. A beat of perfect silence passed before Congresswoman Crockett offered a small, cool smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I thank the senator for his concern regarding my comprehension," she began, her voice measured and clear, devoid of any trace of the anger everyone expected. It was this calm that was so utterly disarming. She then proceeded not with the emotional rebuttal, but with a forensic dismantling. "The senator questions my understanding of complex fiscal matters. Perhaps he should review the data from the Federal Reserve showing that minority-owned small businesses, often started with personal credit cards and family loans, are creating jobs at twice the rate of their counterparts. That's not sentiment, Senator, that's data." She paused, letting the statistic hang in the air. "The women I represent, the single mothers working multiple jobs, they are PhDs in resource allocation. They understand the cost of $1 because they stretch each one to cover daycare, groceries, and rent. A balancing act I suspect is far more complex than any corporate merger." Then came the pivot, the masterstroke. She turned her gaze fully upon him, her expression one of genuine, piercing curiosity. "But I must confess I am curious about the senator's qualifications. What in your experience of inherited wealth and corporate buyouts qualifies you to understand the economic struggle of a family, choosing between putting food on the table or a roof over their head? What in your life has ever taught you the cost of $1 when you've never had to worry about its absence?" The camera cut to Romney. His smirk had vanished, utterly erased. His mouth was slightly agape, his eyes wide with the shock of a man who had never been spoken to in such a manner in his entire life. The condescension had been replaced by a stunned, pallid silence. She didn't just defend her qualifications, she exposed the profound ignorance of questioning them. In one flawless move, she turned the tables and held up a mirror to his privilege, and the reflection left him utterly speechless. The clip didn't just go viral. It detonated across the digital landscape with the force of a cultural earthquake. Before the hearing had even adjourned, my experience's qualification was already climbing the trending lists. A rallying cry for everyone who had ever been made to feel their worth was being questioned. The video was sliced, diced, and memed, her final question to Romney looping endlessly with captions like, "When the student becomes the master," and "Tell me you're privileged without telling me you're privileged." Celebrities, economists, and Politicians from across the spectrum amplified the moment. A Nobel-winning economist tweeted, "This is how you debate structural inequality: data, heart, and devastating truth." A pop star with 50 million followers simply posted the clip with the caption, "Mic dropped." News anchors played it on loop during primetime segments, not as a partisan scuffle, but as a masterclass in political discourse and rhetorical precision. Pundits scrambled to analyze her technique, the calm delivery, the seamless weave of data and personal narrative, the flawless pivot that exposed the fundamental hypocrisy of the attack. It became more than a political moment. It was a cultural catharsis. In living rooms and on timelines, people saw not just a politician winning a debate, but a validation of their own often dismissed struggles and expertise. For a few electrifying days, the entire national conversation shifted to talk about what truly qualifies someone to lead, to speak, to be heard. But beyond the retweets and the headlines, this moment left a lasting mark, teaching a lesson far bigger than any single news cycle. What unfolded in that hearing room was more than a political victory. It was a profound lesson in where true expertise resides. For too long, we've been sold a lie that qualification comes from Ivy League degrees, from generational wealth, from moving pieces on a board in mahogany-paneled rooms. But real understanding isn't forged in lecture halls. It's forged in life. It's carved from the struggle of making ends meet, from the ingenuity of building something from nothing, from the quiet dignity of those who solve real problems with real stakes every single day. Jasmine Crockett's triumph was a declaration that proximity to pain qualifies you more than proximity to power. Her calm wasn't just composure. It was the unshakable confidence of someone who knows her worth isn't determined by the approval of those who have never walked in her shoes. She stood there, a living testament to the idea that condescension is no match for clarity, that arrogance is powerless in the face of authenticity. This moment was a blueprint for anyone who has ever been patronized, sidelined, or made to feel less than. It was a reminder that you do not need permission to speak your truth. You only need the courage to voice it. In a world of Romneys, be a Crockett. Arm yourself with truth. Root yourself in principle, and speak with a clarity that cannot be ignored. Let this be a reminder that dignity will always outlast arrogance. If you believe in amplifying voices that speak truth to power, share this video with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe to this channel for more moments that prove our politics can still be an arena of principle, not just partisanship. This isn't just about politics, it's about power. Who has it, who gets to wield it, and what it sounds like when it speaks with truth. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe now.